in Milwaukee. For more, let's bring in University of Wisconsin-Madison professor of political science, Barry Burden. Also with us is Maverick PAC co-chair Morgan Ortagus. Barry, good of you to be here. I heard Charles Krauthammer last night say Jeb needs to have a win. This is Jeb's debate. He's a dead man walking if he doesn't. Do you agree or not?
I don't know about dead man walking, but he needs to do something in the debates to show his supporters, his donors, that there's some action there. I think there's some trepidation on their part. Having more money than the other candidates has not put him at the front of the polls. But part of it also is just waiting to see what happens to these front runners. Carson and Trump, I think, are unlikely to be in these positions in a month or two from now, certainly as we get close to Iowa. So part of it, I think, is a waiting game and letting voters come back to maybe some of the more establishment candidates.
Yeah, why do you say that? Because this is an issues-oriented debate tonight. That's very clear. And in terms of policy and strength on various policies, Jeb Bush does have the upper hand compared to a lot of candidates when Ben Carson is just beginning to kind of give detail about what he wants to do in terms of tax plan, in terms of reforming Medicare, for example. Donald Trump, you get a little bit of it, but it's still not the kind of policy that you've heard from Jeb Bush.
Oh, that's right. I mean, that's one thing that distinguishes these insurgent candidates from the establishment candidates. Rubio and Bush and to Cruz, to some extent, are versed in policies in a way that Carson and Trump are not. And that shows in the debates. The more they focus on policy, the more those disparities are apparent.
A dead man walking if he doesn't show something tonight?
I don't think so, but I have a quick question for the professor.
Yeah, go ahead.
What do you think is going on in the electorate? As a political scientist, what do you think is going on in the electorate where they don't care as much about policy and they care more about this sort of rhetoric that we're hearing?
Well, this is sort of a courtship period, and I think Republican voters are trying out a variety of candidates. You look back on previous cycles like this, there were candidates like Howard Dean back in 2004 for the Democrats, Herman Cain for the Republicans, Michelle Bachmann at one point, a variety of candidates who have come and gone.
Donald Trump has led in the polls more or less, except for one blip for 90 days, though.
Yes.
Has that happened before?
No, that's new. For a candidate who really has no background in politics, certainly not elected office, to be riding at this level. But he's different in so many ways. You know, he was a celebrity before he entered the race, so he was vetted, I think, in a way that a Carson or Herman Cain had not.
And certainly, Morgan, I want to bring Morgan in here. And by the way, thank you, Anthony, for preventing me from doing my Howard Dean yell, which I've perfected over the years. It's like one of my favorite things to do.
After I have my 4 shots of espresso, I'm going to encourage you to do that.
Because back then, Morgan, it was about a lot more than just the screeching howl of Howard Dean that ended his campaign.
That buried him.
But again, there's so many other ways to communicate with the electorate at this point. Twitter, and is that why Donald Trump has done so well at this point?
You know, it's funny that you mentioned Twitter. I was getting ready to go to bed last night, much later than I wanted to, and I looked at Twitter before I went to bed and noticed that Trump was tweeting late at night, and I thought, whoever his campaign handler needs to give him a bedtime. I think he sits up with a glass of scotch tweeting at night. I think, you know, I mean, listen, Trump, others, this is not a phenomenon. It's not something new that we're seeing in politics. I think it's certainly new for the Republican Party, even though we did have Herman Cain 4 years ago. We certainly have a tradition of wanting the most conservative and accomplished person to be our nominee, and that's a history that I'm proud of, and not something that I think we should be shying away from. We should not be trying to find the Republican version of Obama.
This is an example of what has been going on day after day, week after week. I started talking about Jeb, and it pivots to Trump.
Yeah, well,
we talk about Rubio, it pivots to Trump.
Well, that's a great point. I mean, one of the questions is Jeb a dead man walking? With respect, once again, the election's not tomorrow. And I can tell you, in New Hampshire, and I keep bringing it because I live there, he was just at our house. We had over 300 people show up, and every one of them walked out and said, whoa. He's spending.
Why did they say whoa?
Because he came in, he was focused, he answered the questions, no BS, and he nailed it. And people were there, and they were very, very impressed. That being said, in New Hampshire, the first in the nation primary state, they make that decision 4, 5, 6 days out. So if the election was tomorrow, I'd say, yeah, he's in trouble. But it's not. And he's got the money, he's got the support, and he and others. I think he is well poised. Chris Christie is well poised in New Hampshire, as is Donald Trump. And Marco is getting more. I believe it's between those those four for the.
Barry, anything surprising you're expecting to see tonight?
Surprising. I don't know. It'll be a different field. It's only 8 candidates tonight rather than 10 or 11. So I think they'll each get more time to talk about the issues, and they're going to be looking at one another in a way they had not in the past.
Yep.
The gloves are off when it comes to Carson. Trump has shown that over the last week. So
yeah,
this will be a different dynamic.
I see Rubio and Trump going at it.
Well, how about Rubio and Cruz, because they are kind of always paired together as more with similar.
Well, they have a lot of respect actually for each other too. They work.
These candidates have respect for one another until they don't anymore.
Yeah, but they have to work together.
Rubio was a Jeb protege, and Jeb comes out of left field with an attack on Rubio, which fell flat last time.
Out, yeah.
Well, to answer your question, I don't think he's a dead man walking. He's getting a lot better. There's an arbitrage between how the public sees Jeb Bush and who he really is. And I think he's working now on trying to close that gap. Once he closes that gap, I think he's going to be in the pack in a way that's going to surprise people.
Yeah, but it's a lot like me telling my mother, I'm really not that foul-mouthed. I don't really use expletives that often, but then when you do...
Then we talk to her and we tell her the truth.
Exactly,
so.
Thank you.
She knows you're charming.
Barry Burden of the University of Wisconsin-Madison, thank you so much for being here this morning.
Thank you.
And Morgan Ortagus, thank you so much as well.